My name is Stella. I am 32 years old, and I was on the Amtrak Acela heading back to Boston when I helped a quiet elderly man who introduced himself as a retired law school dean. He offered to accompany me to my divorce mediation the next morning. My husband Derek laughed when he saw the old man walking beside me through the courthouse hallway. 20 minutes later, Derek's attorney was gripping the edge of the conference table to keep himself standing, and the judge who had been rubber-stamping every decision in Derek's favor was staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Let me tell you how we got there. The Acela was 90 minutes out of Philadelphia when my phone buzzed against the fold-down tray. I had been running a compliance review on my laptop. I work in healthcare billing fraud detection, which means I spend my days finding money that powerful people try very hard to pretend does not exist. I am good at it. I have always been good at it. Derek used to call it my superpower when it suited him and my obsession when it did not. The text was from Derek. We had been separated for 6 weeks ever since I came home from a conference and found a second toothbrush in our bathroom that was not mine. He had filed the very next day, which told me he had been planning it for a long time. I read the message twice. He had sold our vacation property in Vermont, a lake house his grandmother had left us jointly, the place where I had spent every 4th of July for 8 years keeping his family fed and his investors comfortable and his image polished. He had listed it without telling me, closed the sale, and moved the $480,000 into an LLC registered in Delaware. Then he offered me $15,000 to sign the divorce settlement and disappear. It is more than enough to cover a few months while you find a place, he wrote. Do not make this harder than it has to be. My lawyers eat people like you for breakfast. I closed the message. I did not respond. I pulled up my compliance software and started tracing the LLC registration instead. The man sitting across the aisle had been reading a copy of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, the way most people read a thriller, leaning into it, occasionally marking the margins with a mechanical pencil. I noticed him because nobody reads that book on a train for pleasure. Then I stopped noticing him because I was 3 layers deep into Delaware corporate records, and the rest of the world had ceased to exist. The sound that pulled me back was a thud and the soft scatter of papers across the aisle carpet. He had gone very still in his seat and the color had left his face. That gray, clammy stillness I recognized from years of managing my father's insulin schedule when I was a teenager. I was out of my seat before I had made a conscious decision to move. Sir, I crouched beside him, keeping my voice even. Can you hear me? When did you last eat? He blinked slowly. Early this morning. I thought I had managed it. You hadn't. I flagged down the attendant and had orange juice in his hands in under 2 minutes. I sat with him while the shaking eased. While he recovered, I gathered his papers from the floor. The documents were dense. Corporate trust filings, annotated case citations, a legal brief so thoroughly marked up it looked like a second document had grown inside the first. My eyes snagged on a depreciation schedule buried in a real estate trust summary. The numbers did not match. The error was subtle, a misapplied accelerated deduction that would cascade into a significant tax liability. But I have spent 6 years finding exactly this kind of mistake inside hospital billing systems, and the pattern recognition is automatic. Whoever prepared this trust filing miscalculated the depreciation basis, I said, setting the stack on his tray table and pointing to the relevant line. It's going to cost the estate around $80,000 in unnecessary tax liability if it isn't corrected before the next fiscal close. He studied the page for a long moment. Then he looked at me with the particular attention of someone who is evaluating rather than simply observing. I have had 2 senior associates review that file, he said. Neither of them caught that. It's easy to miss if you're not specifically looking for it. I'm a compliance auditor. Numbers are my first language. He extended a steady hand. My name is Beaumont, just a retired law school dean coming into Boston to visit former students. I shook it. Stella, it's nice to meet you. We were pulling into South Station when my phone lit up with a message from my best friend Cora. She had sent it without any text, which meant she could not find words for it either. The photo showed a woman I recognized immediately, Derek's girlfriend Roxanne, standing outside my building, wearing my grandmother's cameo brooch pinned to a coat I had never seen her in. My grandmother had pressed that brooch into my hands the week before she died. She had worn it to her wedding, to my mother's college graduation, to every occasion in her life that mattered. It had been in my jewelry box 4 days ago. Below the image, Roxanne had posted to her public account, "New jewelry, who dis?" Some women just weren't enough to hold on to what they had. She was waiting at the end of the platform, standing right there, holding a manila envelope the way people hold something they expect to be refused. She spotted me before I could redirect. And she walked toward me with the specific confidence of someone who has been rehearsed. "Derek wanted to make sure you got your papers the moment you stepped off the train," she announced, loud enough for commuters nearby to glance over. She pressed the envelope against my chest. "He said the offer is $15,000 and it expires at 5 o'clock. After that you get nothing and you pay his legal fees on top." I let the envelope fall, it hit the platform between us. She looked me over with visible pity. "Honestly, I get it. 8 years propping up someone else's ambitions and nothing to show for it. Derek told me you used to be driven. It's sad what happens to people." I stepped closer and lowered my voice. "You can tell Derek I won't be signing anything. And while you're passing along messages, you might want to ask him about the brooch you're wearing." Her chin lifted. "He gave it to me. He said it was a vintage piece. It belonged to my grandmother." I watched the certainty drain from her face. "I filed a police report for a stolen heirloom item 4 days ago before I boarded this train. Receiving stolen property is a crime. Receiving stolen property that was transported across a state line is a federal offense." I held her gaze. "Enjoy the brooch, Roxanne." She took a stumbling step back, one hand moving toward the pin. A calm voice cut through the station noise behind me. "That is quite enough." Mr. Beaumont had come up without a sound. He was leaning on a polished cane. I hadn't noticed him carrying on the train, but there was nothing frail about the way he placed himself between Roxanne and me. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. There was a quality to his stillness that made the crowd around us go a little quieter, the way a room settles when someone of actual authority enters it. "My car is just outside," he said to me. "Please allow me to offer you a ride." His driver held the rear door without being asked. Inside, the leather was soft and the city moved past the tinted windows in silence, and for the first time in 6 weeks I exhaled completely. Derek called before we reached the expressway. I answered because I wanted to hear his voice while he still thought he was winning. "You think walking away from Roxanne means you won something?" he said without greeting. "I have Hargrove. He's been doing divorce law in this city for 25 years. He and the judge assigned to our case went to the same law school. You don't have a lawyer. You don't have leverage. Sign the papers today or suffer the consequences." I ended the call. Mr. Beaumont watched me from across the seat. He sounded more frightened than confident, he said. "He should be." I opened my laptop. "Can I show you something?" For the next 40 minutes I walked him through what I had assembled over the previous 6 weeks. I had started with the Vermont property sale and traced the wire transfers through 3 Delaware LLCs, each receiving a portion of the proceeds before the money consolidated in a holding company registered under Derek's business partner's name. That same holding company had purchased a condominium in the South End 2 months before Derek filed for divorce. The deed listed Derek as buyer, and on the guarantor's signature line, in handwriting that was almost but not quite right, was my name. "I never signed that document," I said. He leaned closer and studied the signature for a long time. "The pressure pattern in the final letters is inconsistent with a natural signature. I have 8 years of signed joint tax returns to compare it against." He forged it. He sat back. "That is not merely concealment. He constructed a document designed to implicate you if the LLCs are ever audited. His forensic-minded wife who signed off on the partnership." "Exactly. Show me every source." I showed him everything. He listened the way I imagined he had listened to thousands of arguments. Without interrupting, without reacting, taking careful notes in the narrow margins of a legal pad he pulled from his briefcase. When I finished, he pointed to the interstate wire transfers. "His attorney will argue that any evidence you gathered from shared home systems is inadmissible. He will call it fruit of the poisonous tree. He will make the argument confidently because he expects the assigned judge to accept it without scrutiny." He paused. "He will be wrong, but he will not know that until you tell him." He wrote a case citation on a clean page of the legal pad. tore it out and handed it to me. Look this up tonight. A commercial workspace loses its privacy protection when it is actively used to commit interstate wire fraud. Your access through your marital LLC membership was entirely lawful. His motion will collapse the moment you cite this ruling. He handed me the page. Build your binder tonight. 4 sections: concealed marital assets, forged documents, interstate wire transfers, supporting authentication. Number every exhibit. Put source records behind every summary page. A dishonest lawyer can attack an accusation. He cannot attack an organized record. The car pulled up to my hotel. One more thing, he said through the window. Do not show everything at once. Let him believe he still controls the room. Arrogant men confess when they're certain the truth can't touch them. Derek had frozen our joint accounts. The credit card declined at the front desk. I used my corporate expense card, which was a serious professional risk, and I accepted it without hesitation because survival requires calculated choices. I sat at the desk in my room from 8 that evening until 5:30 the next morning. I built 4 exhibit sections. I generated chain of custody notations for every document: source, acquisition date, access method, authentication. I printed 2 complete sets from 3 independent public databases. I drew a single-page diagram showing the money's movement. Vermont property sale, domestic wire, 3 LLCs, holding company, South End condo, forged guarantor line. At 6 in the morning, Derek left a voicemail. I hope the floor at the bus station was comfortable, he said and laughed. Come in, sign the papers, and I'll throw in an extra $500 for moving costs. It's my final offer. I listened to it once, then I typed my reply. You built your whole case on numbers, mine are cleaner. I hit send, picked up my binder and left. Hargrove's conference room was designed to make you feel small. The table enormous, the chairs on your sides slightly lower, the view behind Derek and his attorney framing the city like a painting meant to establish who owned things here. Derek was already leaning back when I walked in, looking at my binder the way adults look at something a child has drawn. You actually put together a little presentation, he said. Hargrove was smoother. He slid a settlement agreement across the table, set a pen beside it. The check on top read $15,000. My client is being generous. This covers a first month's rent somewhere reasonable. We can have this done in 20 minutes. I'm not signing. Derek's jaw tightened. You don't have a lawyer, Stella. You don't know what you're walking into. I placed my binder on the table. I opened it to the routing numbers, the LLC registrations, the wire transfer timestamps, the condo deed, and the guarantor page, my forged signature enlarged to fill the entire exhibit sheet. The color left Derek's face in stages the way a tide pulls out. Then the door opened and Miriam walked in. His mother wore a fur-trimmed coat and the expression of a woman who has never once accepted no from a room. She marched to the table and pointed at my binder with one manicured finger. You have no right to sit here making accusations against my son. He built everything he has from nothing. You wrote his accomplishments for 8 years and you have the nerve to walk in here with a scrapbook of conspiracy theories. She stepped closer. Sign those papers. If you do not, I will personally call your department director and tell him you misused your professional database access to spy on a private citizen. You will be fired before lunch. You will never work in compliance again. I did not move. Hargrove held up one hand toward Miriam, then turned back to me. His tone shifted, quieter, more deliberate. I have to acknowledge this is thorough work. If we were in a federal regulatory hearing right now, my client might have a genuine problem. He reached across the table and closed my binder with a flat final motion. But we are not in a federal hearing, we are in a family law mediation. Tomorrow we will be in state divorce court. He laced his fingers together. Every document in this binder came from your husband's home office network, his encrypted files accessed without a court-ordered subpoena. Under the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, every single page is legally tainted. I will file a motion to suppress before your opening statement is finished. The judge will grant it in under 5 minutes. He smiled for the first time. He and I have known each other for 22 years. Derek laughed. It landed in my chest like cold water. I stood up and walked out. On the elevator down, my phone buzzed, a message from Mr. Beaumont. I reviewed the documents. Meet me at the cafe across from the courthouse at 7 tomorrow morning. I found the crack in his argument. I sat on a bench outside and watched the city move past. Then I went back to my room and I reviewed the federal precedent he had given me until I could recite it by memory. He was already seated when I arrived, 2 coffees waiting, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. I told him everything Hargrove had said. He listened without interrupting. Hargrove is working from a state-level privacy framework, he said when I finished. He assumes the judge will accept it without pushing back. He is playing a state-level game. He slid his coffee cup slightly to the side, a small deliberate gesture. The federal precedent I gave you addresses this exact circumstance. When a shared workspace is actively used to commit interstate wire fraud, the expectation of privacy is extinguished entirely by the nature of the criminal activity. You did not conduct an illegal search, you uncovered an ongoing federal crime. His motion has no foundation. He paused. And no judge will rule in favor of a legally indefensible motion when the co-chair of the State Bar Ethics Committee is sitting in the same room. I looked at him. He offered a measured, unhurried smile and said nothing more. My phone buzzed. It was Cora, a screen recording of Roxanne's live stream. She was standing in the middle of a Tesla dealership, spinning the camera across the showroom floor while Derek stood at the finance desk behind hers, signing paperwork. He said he has all this newly freed up money just sitting there, Roxanne announced to her followers, holding up her hand to show the brooch pinned to her lapel. We are starting our life fresh, no dead weight dragging us down. I turned the screen so Mr. Beaumont could see it. He watched for a moment. Save that recording, he said. The judge should see how your husband chose to spend his morning before appearing in court to claim he has no liquid assets. We walked to the courthouse together. His cane tapped a steady rhythm on the sidewalk, and somehow it was the most confident sound I had heard in weeks. Derek and his group were clustered in the corridor outside courtroom 7. Hargrove, Miriam, and Roxanne arranged around him like attendants at a presentation. Roxanne had the Tesla key fob clipped to her handbag. Derek saw us coming and started laughing before we were even close. He pointed at Mr. Beaumont. Stella, you actually went and found yourself a nursing home volunteer to hold your hand today? You really couldn't afford a real lawyer? He made sure his voice carried down the corridor. Miriam snorted. Hargrove permitted a thin, patient smile. Mr. Beaumont's expression did not change by a single degree. We pushed through the courtroom doors. Inside, Judge Stanton had the distracted efficiency of a man who had already decided how the next hour would go. He glanced at my empty table, registered that I had no attorney on record, and produced a small noise that managed to convey both impatience and pity in a single syllable. Hargrove stood immediately, polished and prepared. He laid out the motion to suppress in practiced language. Unauthorized search, privacy violation, fruit of the poisonous tree. He cited the case number he clearly expected the judge to accept without reading. Judge Stanton was already reaching for his pen. The quiet sound of movement from the gallery stopped him. Mr. Beaumont rose from the front row. He moved through the low gate separating spectators from the courtroom floor with unhurried deliberateness, cane tapping twice against the hardwood, and came to stand beside my table. The judge looked up. What happened to his face in that moment is difficult to describe precisely. The practiced authority drained out of it all at once, replaced by something I can only call the expression of a man who has just realized the ground he's standing on is not what he assumed. He set his pen down. He straightened. Justice Beaumont. His voice had gone formal and careful. I wasn't aware you were in the building, sir. At the respondent's table, Hargrove turned his head. I watched the understanding reach him the way cold water reaches the extremities, slowly at first, then everywhere at once. His hand found the table edge. Derek looked back and forth between his attorney and the judge. Who is this? He whispered. Hargrove did not answer him. Frederick Beaumont was not a retired law school dean. He was a retired judge of the First Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most consequential federal appellate courts in the country. More critically, he was the current co-chair of the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers, the body responsible for disciplining and disbarring attorneys in the state. He had written the textbook on federal appellate procedure that Hargrove had studied in law school. Hargrove understood with absolute clarity what it meant that he was standing on the opposite side of this courtroom. Justice Beaumont requested permission to serve as my pro-hack vice advisor. Judge Stanton granted it before the sentence was finished, leaning forward with an eagerness that would have been comical under different circumstances. "Please continue with your motion, Mr. Hargrove," Justice Beaumont said pleasantly, settling into the chair beside me. "We are all listening very carefully." Hargrove delivered the remainder of his argument without once looking up from his legal pad. What had been performed confidence was now technically accurate language delivered by a man who already knew it would fail. When he finished, I stood. I presented the federal precedent. I read the relevant passage directly into the record and explained in plain terms why my access to the LLC documents as a named member of our marital business entity was entirely lawful, and why Derek's home office lost any privacy protection the moment he used it to route stolen funds across state lines. I submitted the full binder into evidence. I asked that Derek be called to testify. Judge Stanton denied the motion to suppress without any visible deliberation. He admitted the entire binder into the record. The ally he had expected to protect had become, in 15 minutes, a man whose professional conduct was now being passively evaluated by the Ethics Committee co-chair sitting 7 feet away. Derek walked to the witness box slowly. He raised his right hand and his fingers were not steady. I took my time. I walked him through the Vermont property sale. He confirmed the offshore LLC. I walked him through the condo deed and the signature on the guarantor line. He confirmed it was his signature. Then when I asked if I had signed that document, something in him gave way. "You never touched it," he said. And then, as if the explanation would soften the admission, "It was an administrative shortcut. I intended to pay off the mortgage before it became relevant." I let the words settle in the quiet room. Then I asked him about the Tesla. He reached for confidence the way a man reaches for something he dropped in the dark slowly, not certain his hand will find it. "That was a discretionary executive bonus. The company had a strong quarter. It's my personal money, legitimately earned." I handed the bailiff the certified SEC filings I had pulled the night before. "Your LLC's shareholder distribution account shows no approved bonus allocation for this quarter," I said. "The funds used for the vehicle purchase trace directly to the Vermont property proceeds, the same proceeds currently sitting in the Delaware LLC, the same funds you represented to this court you do not have." He stared at me from the witness box. "You hid marital assets in shell companies. You forged my signature to expose me to legal liability if those LLCs were ever investigated. Then you spent those same funds on camera this morning, in a dealership, while sworn depositions from this proceeding were still pending." I closed the binder. "I didn't invent those numbers, Derek. I just read them." Something snapped. He stood up in the witness box, and his voice came out stripped of everything he had walked in wearing: the ease, the assurance, the practiced certainty that the rules applied differently to men like him. "I built every dollar of that company while you sat in a hospital auditing other people's billing codes. I was the one closing deals and building something real and taking the risks that actually matter. That money exists because of me, not because of some spreadsheet you ran from a cubicle, and I will not stand in this room and lose it to someone who couldn't even." The gavel came down. Derek stopped. He looked at the bench, he looked at Justice Beaumont, he looked at me. The flush left his face, and what replaced it was a stillness that had nothing composed about it. Just the hollow look of a man watching something he built a long time coming apart all at once. He sat down. "Judge Stanton awarded me 100% of the marital estate. The Vermont proceeds, the South End condo, the LLC holdings, Derek's stake in the company, all of it on grounds of deliberate concealment, forgery, and documented financial abuse." He referred the matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Federal Wire Fraud. He ordered Derek's accounts frozen effective immediately, assessed all legal fees to Derek, and added maximum punitive damages. He instructed the bailiff to deliver the full binder and complete court transcript to the federal prosecutor assigned to financial crimes. Miriam stood up in the gallery and started screaming. Security removed her before she finished her second sentence. Hargrove packed his briefcase and walked out without looking at his client. The hallway outside was crowded when we emerged. I heard Roxanne before I saw her. She had backed Derek against the wall and was telling him in a low, tight voice that she needed to know right now what frozen accounts meant for the lease and the credit card, and whether the Tesla was actually hers. Derek was trying to speak, she was not listening. I was nearly to the elevator when he saw me. He crossed the hallway in 4 strides, and then something in his legs stopped working correctly, and he went down, both knees, right there on the courthouse floor, in front of a dozen people who all had phones in their hands. He grabbed the hem of my coat. "Please!" His voice was unrecognizable. "Tell them it was a mistake. You can fix this. You know the numbers better than anyone. Tell them the audit had errors. Please, Stella, I'm begging you. I cannot go to federal prison, please." I stood still and looked at him for a moment. 8 years. His startup launched on my salary while I took on extra consulting work nights and weekends so he could focus. His investors charmed at dinners I planned down to the place cards. His mother's cruelty swallowed in silence because I had convinced myself that keeping peace was the same as keeping love. The Vermont lake house sold without my knowledge, my grandmother's brooch on another woman's coat. Divorce papers served the morning after his company IPO. "I'm a compliance auditor," I said. "I find what's hidden and I put it in a report, that's all I did here." I removed his hand from my coat and walked to the elevator. In the parking garage, a police officer intercepted Roxanne before she reached the exit. The receiving stolen property report had been processed that morning. The brooch had crossed state lines when Derek brought it from our home in Connecticut to Boston to give to her, which elevated it to a federal charge. She unclipped it with shaking fingers and placed it in an evidence bag without looking at me. I stood in the cold air of the garage and held it in my palm. My grandmother had worn it to her wedding in 1961. I slipped it into my coat pocket where it sat warm and solid and entirely right. Justice Beaumont was waiting near the exit with a sealed envelope. Inside was an offer letter from a healthcare compliance firm headquartered in New York. Senior investigator, partnership track, a compensation package that made me stand completely still for a long moment. "They reached out to me 3 months ago looking for a recommendation," he said. "I told them I would know the right person when I met her. I believe I have." I shook his hand. Then, because it was the only honest response I had left, I laughed. A real one. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and has nothing measured about it. 6 months later, I am sitting at a desk with a window that faces the East River. The email about Derek's sentencing arrived while I was reviewing a compliance audit for a hospital system in New Jersey. 12 years, federal, no early release. The LLC assets were liquidated to compensate shareholders. Miriam sold the family home in Wellesley to cover mounting legal fees and moved into her sister's spare room. Roxanne quietly deleted every social media account she had used to document the life she thought she was stepping into. I keep my grandmother's brooch in a small dish on the corner of my desk. Every morning it's the first thing I see when I sit down, and I think about what she told me the week she pressed it into my hands. That the thing about real worth is that nobody can take it from you without your permission. She was right. It just took losing everything Derek thought he owned to finally understand what that meant for me.